Hello, world. Today we are talking to Jason McCarty, the founder and principal consultant at Fire Agency. What I loved about our conversation was how deep into the weeds we got on what distinguishes product teams and makes them truly exceptional. Without further ado, let's have Jason take it away. Jason, thanks so much for joining us today. For the folks tuning in, can you give us the highlight reel of your career journey so far?
Yeah, sure thing. My name's Jason McCarty. Right now, I'm a principal consultant at Scalefire. I started my career in Fortune 500s doing programs, operations of them. And then I moved to development agencies. And now I help as a fractional product leader for founder-led businesses.
Amazing. So you've gotten to see how like a lot of different product teams operate. How are they typically approaching product collaboration?
It's a good question. It's definitely different, the size of company. But product collaboration is always been around where you get feedback and you centralize that feedback and how you communicate it across the team.
Yeah, I'm glad you called out the size of the team because I think that just has such big impact if you're a tiny startup versus a big org. What have been some lessons you picked up working on teams of different sizes? Like, how do you approach that small team versus that big team?
Yeah, I think when it comes to product collaboration, I always think of like refining an idea. In a very small team, refining the idea can very much be synchronous conversations. But the hard part with a larger team is that you have so many different cooks in the kitchen and you can't get everyone on the same page, right? So for me, what typically ends up having to be is that what used to be a conversation you can have in Slack huddle for a small team needs to be a PRD created, a huge launch announcement with a narrative before you even launched it for all of the product team and the product designers to be aware of what's happening and how it might impact different departments working on the product itself. So it's definitely that you have to kind of reverse engineer the launch for a larger org. Whereas for a smaller company, you kind of build as you go because everyone's always on the same page.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm curious. So the smaller orgs, you're kind of like a team and you're all working on the product, right? It's like there's one product, there's only one thing we're building. Those larger teams, though, I think there's so many different ways to sort of organize the work. You've got maybe by feature or feature set or capability, and then separate product lines within that and things like that. How do you typically see those larger orgs organizing their work?
Yeah. I've mostly done a lot of my work in smaller orgs, so I can't speak extensively to the enterprise. Most of my enterprise or most of my like product work is in that smaller sector, founder led, 50 employees type of thing. But I have seen firsthand from a lot of interviews that a lot of the larger orgs find that it's a common problem when you look at scaled process. And so it is challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we hear that a lot too. And so when you're joining a team and sort of getting, kind of getting into the weeds a little bit more, are there like specific rituals or practices you try to bring from team to team that you just love sharing and getting everybody on board with?
I really think I'm really a believer in Scrum. I feel like the process that's been instilled, if it's done right, Scrum is the best process to get a team to execute. I find that if you are too hands off, you do this Kanban approach. You never can tell the business when you deliver on things. You can never tell the customer when to expect a feedback prototype or something like that. And so for me, I think though Scrum works different for every company because its first manifesto is people over process. And you find that people are so different. Whenever they work in different industries, they have different personalities, and you can't quite follow Scrum exactly the same way at every company. And I can give you many type of reasons why that is, but I have found over the years that if I tried to copy and paste it, it ends up being a bit of a dumpster fire.
Gotcha. Yeah, we're fans of Scrum as well. One thing we've run into though is I think Scrum encourages sort of a production mindset of
Mm.
because there's a deliverable, right? Like we want to get at the end of the sprint, we've got something to deliver, and shaping work or exploration, it's harder to do, right? In that context. So how do you like sort of balance that tension?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Scrum is a process, but I think about what you do should be outcome driven. And when I look at how people try to mix the two together, like Scrum by nature isn't going to drive a business outcome. And what I mean by that is that like it's just the tools you use to build, but what you're building needs to be valuable. And so it's really the products team's job to do the discovery of what goes into the Scrum process. So yeah, it's definitely a process problem statement rather than like a value problem statement.
Gotcha. And I loved how you frame that because I think I think it resonates so much with our experience. I think especially with like more junior organizations or where product is sort of a new practice that they're installing into the team,
Mm.
that sort of value mindset is hard, I think, for people to understand. You almost have to fail a whole lot and like waste and see like, okay, now I understand why we want to lead with sort of that approach. Is there anything that you do to try to ease that transition for those junior teams to kind of start adopting that mindset a little bit more proactively?
Yeah, it is a mindset, and you do have to overwork the product team to also be their own internal sales team as well. It's very hard when you have again you can't just apply that to every single business. So if you're working on a very technical product, it's very hard to evangelize maybe a customer vision that's used to seeing an interface or something like that. So junior devs, I mean, it's hard. Junior like development teams, it's very hard to get them to think like a product, to think like we're shipping business outcomes. But one thing I have found super valuable, and I do it everywhere I go, is put the why statement behind every single ticket that gets put into a sprint, a backlog. Having them be able to understand a very well written why we're doing what I'm doing, how it associates to a bigger epic, right, that accomplishes some outcome. I believe psychologically over time, these junior developers do start thinking like product, because they're so used to being like the first thing I read when I'm going to size a ticket or refine is like, why am I even doing this thing? And it also forces the product person to be like, is this something I'm even selling? Like, am I even sold on this myself? Like, am I just making them do it because I got feedback from the business and I immediately turned it into a solution? And I didn't even do the product process, right, that I should be going through. And so if you put the why in these tickets and you put the why behind every single ticket and you hold yourself accountable to that, I think that's how you can get junior devs to think more about the business.
I love that. Getting to why is hard though. Like it's, I think it's sort of the job of the product manager, right? Or to really push for that. Something that we see with a lot of teams is like the vision's very unclear and very murky, and so it's hard to be like, why are we doing this when we don't have like a roadmap or like even like a North Star to sort of guide our efforts towards. Where do you find that that's the case? And if so, like, how do you sort of like align the team around a North Star?
Yeah. And again, that's another great question because I think the person that solves that will be a billionaire. Because when you're building a product, you have to be okay with the fact that things change. And so when you have this expectation that when I come into the office, it's the same vision year over year, we have a 5-year vision. It's just not a reality for many startup companies. It's not a reality for many medium-sized businesses. You have to adapt. You have to adapt with technology, with that. And so I think too that becomes the other piece of this, which is why am I doing it, and am I okay with it changing over time if we find that I'm going to now undo the ticket later because we found something new. It's learning over output, and like you said, I think at the beginning that's the biggest key here is like if you're able to change I think mature product teams and mature development teams understand that inherently. But it is hard to execute when you have no vision and you have no roadmap. I would say that that is a bad a bad job on the product team to not have that for the business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've made this distinction, or it sounds like you're making this distinction between like a product team and a development team. In your view, are those one and the same? Or are they separate kind of orgs? Like how do you typically like to organize that relationship?
Yeah, it's a shift that I'm seeing more and more. And I'm normally saying that because when I come into an organization, a product team is different and outside of the development team. And I do that mostly because when I say that, it's how it is, right? And
Mhm.
I believe that there should not necessarily be a product manager that's outside managing the development team. I believe that you should have a product owner that's inside the development team, and that one resource is handling strategy and operations with the assistance of the Scrum Master to ensure that the development team has empowerment to execute. And so, to kind of make that distinction, I do believe that the shift with AI will happen to where a product owner is so efficient and knowledgeable that they should be able to balance strategy and operations within one role, as opposed to a full time resource to strategy, a full time resource to the execution piece, this product manager to product owner relationship.
Hmm. Yeah, oh, I like that framing. It's interesting because I think it's a very accurate description of kind of reality on the ground. But then like you go Twitter or somewhere and you start reading, and there's sort of this ideal state where like it's all cross functional and everything is collaborative, and so there's this tension between those sort of those worlds. Do you think the I don't know, in your bubble, because everyone's got their bubble. In
Yeah.
your in your bubble, does
Yeah.
that kind of that discourse reflect your reality and what you've seen, or do people need to kind of get back to the basics?
Yeah, that the basics of like what Scrum was meant to do was meant to like collaborate more, right? It was meant to be able to give a business a pulse on what's happening. And I think we made it messy when we started gatekeeping knowledge. The idea that the product manager is the one with the vision, is like the internal CEO. I've heard many times, like people call that, right? It hurt the organization more than helped it long term. And the reason why I feel like it hurt them is it made development think that they aren't a part of owning the vision, and they aren't a part of the discovery process. They are, and so when you separate, like you said, how I made that distinction, you said Scrum is the process, right? But really, it's just the fact that organizations have separated product from development, and we've initiated a process in development of Scrum, and that makes it seem siloed from the discovery.
Yeah, I'm gonna play devil's advocate for a minute here because I agree with what you're
I
saying,
love
but
it. Yeah.
the rebuttal that I see, like if I'm like a business owner, right, is like, well, developer time, it's a finite resource, right? We only have, and if they're not
Yes.
working on features, we're not making progress as a business, right? And so, how do you kind of maybe reframe that for them so they see it? They see the benefits of sort of the more collaborative.
Yeah, the Harvard Business School, Pendo, they've done all these research studies saying that 80% of product features are rarely used in a software product, right? And we're all about building, building, building. And that's not wrong. I don't think I can ever convince a business owner that we're not going to ship this quarter, but we're going to have a lot of knowledge. So, what do you do when you know that that's going to be an obvious objection to saying, we need developers to do more discovery with the team? I think really what it means is that you do allocate a percentage of your resource to it, and you balance that with execution. I do believe if you have a roadmap, you have plenty of work you know you need to do. You validated it. It's tech debt even, right? It's stuff that's very obvious, but you should always dedicate a percentage to refinement, which is review the PRD and raise not just feasibility objections, raise usability objections, raise value, viability, right? All of the risks as an engineer. And how about I give you a research spike to go do that this sprint? And I give you that creative space to be able to say, like, you play a part in making sure that like this doesn't have any holes in the business logic as well. And I think if a product person is not prideful, they'll accept everyone's perspective, and they'll be able to kind of get a really solid PRD at the beginning. Find that helps with refinement too down the road. You know exactly what you need to get done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I think a big part of it too is like, what goals are you setting as an organization? Like, velocity comes to mind. It's especially in a Scrum context, right? People want to move fast, and you see that progress. That's sort of a double-edged sword, right? Because it can encourage that sort of conveyor belt sort of mentality. Are there other like KPIs or goals that you like setting with teams that sort of balance that and promote more of this holistic approach that you're describing?
The KPIs have. By the way, I am not a fan of OKRs, and so that might be its own conversation. But people always use OKRs and KPIs to be like the things that help organizations stay organized. I find that most of the time I'm in leadership meetings talking about OKRs, and most of the call is learning what that really is and why whatever someone set is not outreaching enough and not like too hard, right? So you're like balancing this like weird mentality. But going back to your question, like setting KPIs for the team, I like Gibson Biddle's quarterly rolling roadmap. I think that's a very wise way to look at capabilities. Keep it one word, 2 words, right? What are you trying to get out the door? And I want to keep the creative freedom on how we get there in that quarter, right? So if you go to say like this sprint 1, this sprint 2, this sprint, we do all of these capabilities, the team gets lost because they're like, we weren't able to get it. We have carryover. So my KPI is not focused on like velocity, etc. I would say that whether it's even a KPI, our North Star should be like, as a development team, are we releasing this capability? That would be the output piece of things. But rather like the capability itself should have baked in the outcome, the hypothesis, the metric we have. And that's important. But that should be done way before we build.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's funny. I think a lot of teams, they'll release something and then look for the result, where it's like, oh, like we shipped this e-commerce flow, and like, oh, what effect will that have now? And like it's fascinating to see how many teams kind of operate with that mentality. But
I am curious to hear that on your side. Like, how often is it that you find that PRDs, the product team, brings a selling point, a new feature, but there's no actual like data behind it. It's more of just like, this sounds like it has legs, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of PRDs built on vibes. We we see that all the time, and so I think the best product managers that we collaborate are just doing what you're describing, right? Which is, there's a very clear hypothesis, and it's framed as a hypothesis, right? Because I think the worst PRDs we get are like, we have to do this, like there's no flexibility. We are so confident that this is correct. And that's never the case, right? Because you're always going to learn by releasing something. So even you can have a high degree of confidence, and that can be supported by whatever it is you have on the research side and the and analytics side. But it's interesting that so many people are just vibes, and we're sure this is going to work. So definitely we see that a lot.
How would you teach someone, a product person, to get out of that habit of taking a very stern CEO's direction, and not just changing it into clear requirements for the team to go on a refinement call for, et cetera? Like, how do you break that habit if you were to go in and help a product person?
Yeah. So I've done it 2 different ways. One is to both of them involve showing. So one is like, if we have especially like a business owner who is not product versed, what I like to do is I like to let them fail, which is sort of mean, but it's the only way they're going to see the consequences of their decisions, right? And so if they're like, we have to do this, we have to ship it, I'll say, okay, let's codify everything you're saying as requirements. And you have to do that. That's the most important step in that process, because And then what are the expectations for this? And I kind of frame it that way, as like, if we do this work, what do we expect to happen for us? And try and frame it that way and get it written down. And then you'll ship it. And then we'll do like a review, however, maybe a month after the release or something like that. And we'll say like, okay, these are the expectations. We did it. Here's the reality. And a lot of times, if you're new to product, you're going to have a couple failures right off the bat.
Yeah.
And so it can be very quick to say like, this is what you thought would happen. This is what actually happened. And there's a huge disconnect between those worlds. Right. And so at that point they start saying, hopefully, if they're introspective and can think like logically through it, it's like, oh, I was wrong. Right. Like I had these expectations, they didn't happen. But we've sort of got them in the habit of starting with expectations, which we can translate into hypotheses. So that's sort of like the first approach. The other approach that I've taken is you kind of go skunkworks and you kind of set up maybe an experimentation program and kind of call it like that and kind of say, we're going to release things that are more hypothesis driven and we're going to measure them and we're going to see how they do. And so there's sort of those two camps where you can either codify the work that you're doing and start trying to frame it as in the way you want to and kind of show that effect, or you try to show them what good looks like and say like, hey, we're running experiments. We start with a hypothesis. We've got measurable, testable output. And then let's start building those muscles. And when people start seeing that and they start seeing you reporting on experiment results, that they get excited generally. They're like, oh, this is very different from how we think about it, but this is it resonates. And so that's where we get excited. But so that's to answer your question, kind of where what I've seen work really well with teams.
You touched on this one piece that I find to be the hardest hidden job of a product person, which is when you've released something a month from now, whatever the hypothesis duration is, 90 days sometimes. Mm-hmm. Go look at the data and see if it's validated or not. How do you remember to do that is the question.
Yeah. I think most teams are bad at this. Like you're spot on there, right? Like it's very, because there's such attention to velocity, right? And velocity is a point in time measurement. And so you're never reflecting. So the best teams that we work with have retrospectives, and they have that built into their overall process where we are going back and revisiting past experiments. We are thinking about how we can do our work better. And they have that built into their like sort of operating system as a product team. And it takes time. It's not like an easy practice for people. I think what really helps is having folks on the team who are a little bit more senior, who have kind of gone through those growing pains, and they're looking either for a better solution or they've sort of worked in a good retro environment. And so they can sort of help bootstrap and install that practice. But in the absence of that, you kind of need the team to waste a lot and fail a lot. And then they start feeling that pain of like, we're not making the progress we would hope we were making. And then they go looking for the solutions. And I think that's a very easy one that people pick up on.
You mentioned retrospectives, and I personally have seen probably over 15 different types of definitions of what retrospectives are. I wanted to understand, when you host a retrospective, first off, are there types of retrospectives that you host? Who's involved? And then what's like the most impactful that a product person could contribute to a retrospective?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's great framing. There's the one that I see the most is sort of like the sprint retro, which is at the end of a 2-week cycle, you're thinking about the last 2 weeks of work that you've done, and you're identifying what went well, what didn't go so well, and then what we can improve, with the goal to improve how we practice product and as a team. And I think those are really great for young teams that are not super mature in their product practices and things like that are looking to get more efficient and gel together better. So I think that's where I see those being effective. They're also effective in mature product organizations, but new teams where people are not familiar with how each other's working habits and things like that. So that can be really impactful there. On larger teams where it's like we've been doing product for years and we kind of have everything figured out, those become less effective. And I think they're more useful for like looking at data and kind of having a little bit more of a focus on like the results of the work that we did. And maybe it's not that sprint, but it's the last two sprints or something like that, where it's a little bit more results oriented, and then going from there. So that's like the typical retro. I think what teams need is a sort of like an output review retro, and that's a little bit more aligned with like looking at past experiment results. So if you're a mature team, that can happen much more frequently because I think you're getting a volume of metrics and hopefully like customer stories that you can look into and sort of digest. But if you're a younger team, you don't have that sort of fire hose to drink from.
Yeah.
And so that becomes much more, okay, maybe once a month or once a quarter, even if you're really have some long-term bets, we're going to go and look at all of our research and our results and our kind of metrics and kind of say, did we meet our targets there? So those are kind of the two that I like to run. I'm curious though, is there any that I missed? Like what do you like to run?
I don't think you missed them. I think the Mad, Sad, Glad, even one of the
Mm-hmm.
many sprint retrospective templates.
Mm-hmm.
Um, those are, from what I've seen, mostly a Scrum Master's job. And what I
Mm-hmm.
mean by that is like when you think of what you get from that, that's a data collection meeting where you collect initiatives, tasks, action items to better improve the process of how we work, right? And how
Uh-huh.
we develop. What you shared as your second example, which is this product retrospective, I believe is something that not many orgs even think about.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I believe that if it's unlocked well and really done well with adoption as an org, could change the way and even build a case for experiments. Because what you're doing during that call is you're essentially not only reviewing the output, which is the experiments, but you're also measuring them up against each other. And you're reviewing again, what was the problem that we were trying to solve here? What was the bet we wanted to make on it? So that second piece of things is very interesting to me, and I'm going to take a note on that, Nick, because that's a very powerful meeting that I believe that typically product people have with leadership,
Mm-hmm.
not the development team. And again, this comes back to my main issue with product managers living outside of the development team. You have the idea that product manager is a stakeholder when I believe they should be a direct contributor in the development of things, and we should be creatively working together on that product retrospective, for
Mm-hmm.
example.
Yeah, that's kind of where my head was going too, and it's interesting when you start kind of framing things in that way. You build collective knowledge, right? It's not like all in the product manager's head anymore, which I think can really happen, especially if you put that much pressure on them. And that's not fair. It's not fair to the product manager. It's not fair to the team as well, because when your developers understand, like we ran these experiments and they had these results, they'll come up with novel ideas. The designer will come up with new ideas. Any stakeholders in the mix with subject matter expertise will have ideas, and so you all of a sudden very quickly get this so many ideas, and which is great because I think sometimes it feels like one person's job to have all the PM has all these ideas, but it really should be a collective exercise.
That's so powerful. A collective exercise of creation of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
How many times have you been given a PRD with the solution already there?
All the time, right? That's like the uh it's part of the template, right? It's like the solution is there. I think the best PRDs point to direction, right? It's like, hey, we want to think about the solution in this context, maybe. And that's really helpful as a designer, because I think designers typically are the ones, and engineering as well, but who are picking up a PRD and saying like, okay, how do we shape this into something tangible that we can all look at? And so if the less prescriptive a PRD can be, the better. At the same time, I think giving it context and giving it direction is really, really helpful. So I don't think PRD should have no conversation about a solution, but I do think they can be much less prescriptive.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's good that you have that distinction because if you say that a PRD is just problem framing,
Mm-hmm.
then you spend a whole meeting in circles with saying where are we going with
Mm-hmm.
that becomes its own monkey that I don't think anyone wants to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to change gears a little bit, and kind of I'm curious to know, was there ever a time where you felt like you didn't have enough technical knowledge and how did you kind of deal with that situation where either the problems you were kind of seeing required a technology that you just didn't understand yet, or the domain itself was so like technically dense that you just need a little bit extra?
To answer it in a very easy way, always. I find myself always being impressed by what I don't know, and it happens every single day. I find that most when I worked at a development agency, and this goes back to career development, I highly, highly recommend working at a development agency if you want to get into product. When I look at how much I learned as a business analyst, working and on many different applications, getting them to market, helping enhance a feature, and just being in charge of working on building requirements that are clear, breaking them down, doing data, right? The whole exercise of the mechanics of product without that real strategy knowledge yet, that helped me understand software so much more. And going back to your question of like where I constantly felt overwhelmed, I felt overwhelmed there specifically because clients that are very technical, customers that are very technical, and you are not a software developer, you find they don't respect ideas that you may have as quick if you can't grasp the technical concepts. So I think most of the time people are starting to become familiar with APIs, right? When you think of the first technical thing, you love saying it, you love being like, oh, there's an API integration. That's usually the first, type of thing. And then where I feel like mostly where I struggled is the databasing side of things. How does that connect to the overall, like are people using stored procedures? Like what exactly are these technical infrastructure plays a huge piece of things. If the application goes down, how do I create a ticket as a product person to like address that next step? I can't drive those PRDs. And I believe, and it's a question for you, is when you are a non-technical product owner working on a product, how does infrastructure and back-end tech debt, how do we drive as a product owner that work through, knowing that you don't have the knowledge to even really build the case for it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a struggle. It's a challenge. And I think that's where like having development leaders on the team that you can like that are true peers. I think a lot of times you'll have product orgs organizing around like the chief product officer, and they might not have a technical counterpart. A lot of orgs have a CTO, and so you kind of want those two people collaborating. And CTO or the head of engineering is fighting for that allocation and kind of saying like, listen, I know we have all these things we want to do, but if we don't pay down this debt here, we're going to be stuck for a very long time, or we're going to very quickly be stuck. And I think that's sort of the part of the responsibility of that technical leadership is to be like, hey, I'm hearing what we're saying here. If we don't focus on any of this stuff and making the case and kind of doing that sales effort to say, this is why we need to do these things. Otherwise, we're going to, have some real consequences.
So do you expect the technical leadership to drive the conversation on refinement calls, drive the breaking down of those stories? Do you essentially say that the product owner does not drive those conversations, story pointing that, right? All the exercises that a tactical team is doing. I guess I'm curious, just really like boots on the ground. How tactically does that work, though?
Yeah. So,
are you expecting a chief technical officer to be breaking down user stories?
right. So no, I'm not. What I expect is you. So if we have a product owner, they're trying to like I think tell the human story, right? Because ultimately, whenever feature we're doing, we're solving some pain for some person, right? And I think we can always come back to that. So there's a human component there, and that has to get translated into technology, right? And that's where I think your technical leads, your like staff level developers, that's sort of where you lean on them and say, can you translate this kind of human problem into technology? And I think that's at the core the job of developer. It's funny, some developers really fight that. They're going to say like, nope, I just need like robot instructions. I need my requirements, and I'll go build it.
Yeah.
And that to me is always a sign of immaturity in a developer. If they can't see beyond the code, that's a huge red flag. But I think the folks that a little bit more senior are leading the team, they're going to be able to translate. And so what I expect in those team meetings is the product owner is sort of framing the work, kind of saying this is the hypothesis that we have based on sort of our understanding of the people involved and the problems we're seeing, and then the solutioning. And this is where designers sort of come into the mix and like, okay, how might we sort of solve this problem? And they are liaising a little bit more with the developers and kind of saying like, okay, is this feasible? And is this possible? And are there things that we're missing or other ways that we could approach this problem based on your technical knowledge, but also the current state of our infrastructure and our code base and things like that. And that's where you sort of get that really good collaboration and that feedback loop. Because otherwise, everything happens in silos. That's where you get the frustration. That's where you get people getting angry.
Yes, 100%. Mm-hmm. One quick question that I have, and this is around in-flight work. Okay, how do you expect peer reviews to play a part in the development lifecycle? I find that when you look at committing to a sprint as a developer, you assume that you are doing the work till it hits QA, right? Mm-hmm. But you find that there's so much of that collaboration that you're saying. Like the idea of talking to a developer about an idea they have on their ticket, or talking about how things work as a whole for our release planning, or finding that there's another task for another developer. Like, how do you expect for that to work when it comes to like PR reviews and all this hidden work? Because really what you're saying is like, that's not trackable. That's assumed that you'll just overachieve and help your other team members out. Yeah. But is that a reality?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a reality in the sense that the work gets done, right? It's going to have to get done at some level. And I think it's a sign of how mature the product organization is. Are we intentionally accounting for that time or not? And so I think there's sort of a max velocity, right? It's this hypothetical, like if we just went full on and we try to do as much work as we possibly can, what can we do in a sprint? And teams sort of know where that limit is, or they develop that understanding over time. And it's, reserving capacity very intentionally and saying, maybe it's 60, right? Whatever the point system or whatever it is. And we're only going to, budget 45 because we know there's other things that are going to happen. We know, and I think this is where like story points and Scrum can get dangerous, is because people are like, this is an 8, we got to get it done. And, this is the true only kind of representation of this amount of work. But then you get into it and it's like, oh, this is actually a 5. Or you get into it and it's like, actually, this is like a 16. We need everybody, right? And so I think just being very realistic and kind of saying, this is an estimate. It's our best guess. We're going to learn as we get into the implementation, and things can adjust. And so there's that balance of understanding everything's an estimate and reserving capacity, so that way you can do these things that are untracked. I don't think you do track them. Like I think I've seen people try to make that effort of like, everything's a ticket and we get it in there, and we have different types of tickets and things like that. I think that's just overhead that actually ultimately slows people down without providing a lot of visibility. And so I think there's just that level of maturity where your product leaders know what your technical leaders are up to, and the technical leaders are communicating proactively that we need to do these things. That's where you have a healthy balance.
I love, Nick, that you, just to read it back to you, I love that you say it's a assumed time that you as a developer, when you're looking at what crazy things a product owner think you can do in a sprint, you should know that that's a part of your workflow, is helping your team. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at your tickets, assume that you are going to spend X amount of time helping the team. And if you look at that as a lens, you actually ingrain that collaboration in the sprint itself, right? Mm-hmm. We have this shared belief that I can get only this done because I'm helping my team when I'm not doing this work. And I believe that if that's evangelized well, you create a very healthy development team, because you're allowing them to have that creative space. And again, I 100% agree with you. Creating more tickets, subtasks of handoffs, who's that benefiting? Um, no CEO wants to see the burn down chart of all of this. That they just want to see the story that you told me, right? The user story that you told me that is going to give some business value. Is it done or not? Right? That's ultimately what like you need to go and evangelize with go to market and figure out how marketing's going to take it. But all those tickets are really for who? The development team. And if you guys are working together, you don't need to have all of those tickets because you find yourself spending so much time micromanaging when there's no benefit to that. You should just be talking to each other. So it's very interesting. And I think you could help a lot of people in an org realize how important it is to that less tickets don't mean less work. It's meaning that we're collaborating more. Right? We're looking at experiments. We're doing these things. And if that's trust, that trust is built, can go very far.
Right. I think the trust thing is really important because you can step into orgs that just either, for very many reasons have that trust has evaporated. And so that's often like if we're stepping into a new team and either the trust hasn't been built or it was there and is gone, it's all about rebuilding. Like it's rebuilding the trust, it's getting everybody aligned. And it's I think in order to do that, you need to be able to show results. And so there is a bit of like you only are able to operate as a product team in that world if you can demonstrate to everybody that it does lead to better outcomes, which is hard, right? Because sometimes product isn't a linear path where you can guarantee that everything's going to get better. But over time, I think if you're getting enough at bats and you behave this way, you can move in that direction and evolve the team that way. So there's a tension there, but it's good. I do want to ask, since we're coming towards the end here, AI is the hot topic these days, and I think everybody's talking about it. I'm curious, how have you seen product and also collaboration start evolving with the advent of AI?
Yeah. Are you more curious to hear the operational side as how teams internally are working and leveraging AI through like building an AI stack? Or are you more curious about like the features that are being built in products?
Let's start with the team, but I'm curious of the feature side as well.
Sure. The building an AI stack, which is just a mixture of off-the-shelf solutions versus customized AI solutions, is really interesting, and it's evolving extraordinarily fast. I believe that every company needs to have an AI strategy, and that involves its own resources to build and execute on. But like I mentioned, it's going around to the departments. It's understanding opportunities for automation. It's listing them out in a prioritized way, and it's doing your research to understand if it's something custom built or something off the shelf. But specifically for product teams, I believe that rapid prototyping has extraordinarily changed the way product people can deliver a concept to an end user for feedback. What I mean by that is like, I know Bolt, version 0, and even Lovable have all come to light, and they showcase this vibe code. I don't know, Nick, if that's the right term or not. But the vibe coding era for product people has unlocked the ability, because before you'd have to have a solution architect, right? A sales engineer, work through the process of catering the product solution for the customer and see if it fits. And then they iterate if needed, etc. With rapid prototyping, you can deliver a very scrappy throwaway code experience to give the concept to the customer within a day or two. Solution architects would take, a week, probably. A product designer, it would take, I would assume if it's 4 to 5 screens, it would take, 2 to 3 days. But when you're looking at like rapid prototyping and using those tools, it really unlocked a lot when it comes to refining with the team, giving the idea to the customer. And I believe it's going to revolutionize how you go about getting feedback.
Yeah. I love that framing. I think something we've seen even with like low fidelity designs or mock-ups is like people will look at them, but they won't really think about them because it's like too pretty and it's too abstract. And there's something about a prototype, even if it's not polished and baked and like high quality, they can touch it, they can feel it, they can get their hands on it, and that triggers in their brains, like some additional investment that you don't often get with like static designs. I'm curious, have you seen that as well, and how has that been resonating with when you're sharing your prototypes?
I have been, I think every product designer has felt defeated when they worked really hard on design. It was completely signed off. Everyone loves it. And as soon as we launch it, it's nothing. There's 15 changes, which pretty much is remodeling the whole house, that needs to get done when usage happens. I see that happen so many times, and it's so demoralizing because you find that the stakeholders, the user, they viewed it really quick. They didn't go through the use cases like they should have. You couldn't get their attention is really what it is. And Figma designs, whether you use Figma, there's many other great tools out there. You just can't get the attention of very busy people whose job is to not do the design work and thinking about the user. And I believe that the clickable prototype at least makes someone feel like it's launched, and it allows for them to go through the actual experience clickable wise. So you can do a screen recording of that, and you can do and get the feedback you need from like how usable it is. And that would take very long if you were just building the screens one by one.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I know we've talked about a little bit about the operations now. Curious to hear how AI is sort of changing your deliverables and like kind of what you're putting out into the world and feature wise.
Yeah, it's helped with taking a lot of raw data, being able to actually provide analytics on it, creating the ability for you to search and discover things a lot faster. So for me, I look at the flywheel of like a user journey, and I think to myself, like, where does AI help the most? And in the past 2 years, I have seen AI help the most in search. So if you're a product that is mostly benefiting by discovery through search, you could benefit through using a lot of AI and ML models. And then I think too, pricing, being able to understand how your competitor is pricing, being able to understand how things change over time. Pricing, in my opinion, has been something that no business changes for years over years over years. And it's a very untapped area of the business that people just set and forget. So you find yourself working 3 years on all of these other features, but you haven't even evaluated if your pricing is too high or too low, right? AI can help with that gap where you find that you don't have resources to dedicate to analyzing that, dynamically changing it, etc. And that can help as scale when you deal with maybe a lot of products that you sell and it's not just a subscription type of thing. So for me, that would be the second piece is pricing optimization. I think the third is document processing. I've had the honor of working at We Salute for a long period of time, and we did a lot of identity verification. And that has been revolutionary. The ability to not just take the context, but to apply logic to saying like, this person isn't just who they say they are, or this document isn't just someone writing the words of it, but we can actually recognize what it is, what insights we get from that, and how it can make a decision. It just reduces manual overload. It makes your company more efficient, and it makes the user get logged in and accessed and getting value quicker. So those would be the three areas, in my opinion. How about you?
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. It's the pricing one is just so powerful. I think that's where my head's at because it's so directly tied to revenue. But so many people, like you said, just failed to look at it as a lever that they can pull in their experience or adjust. So I love the idea that you can kind of iterate on that and keep experimenting and coming up with better and better pricing. That's so powerful. Yeah, AI has been interesting for us because we've seen like a lot of teams use it to automate and remove processes or augment existing processes to kind of just speed up velocity and help aggregate a lot of information that they were sort of doing manually before. And so that's been, I think, a huge win for a lot of those teams. On the product side, we've developed a few kind of AI sort of products and tools and features. And the one thing that I always come back to is you can't really set and forget with AI, at least not yet. you can't really just have it all packaged in the experience and you kind of say, go do stuff for me. You need that human in the loop still to kind of be reviewing output, to be course correcting, to be really engaged with the process. And so that's been because you get hallucinations, you get non-deterministic output. So all those things are, they're a feature, not a bug, right? Of AI, but you need to have those guardrails in place so that way people have I think valuable experiences with it. So that's kind of, and so I think a lot of non-technical people see it as a magic wand where it's like, oh, we're adding AI to the experience and everything's going to be better. And we just add it and it's great. There's a lot of like product thought and technical thought that needs to go into doing it well and doing it in a way that enhances the experience and isn't just more overhead for the experience. So it's been interesting. It's been, I won't say it's all been positive. I've seen some less than stellar implementations, but for the generally trending positive now at this point. So people are getting more used to it, and there's some practices evolving, which have been good.
Yeah, I looked at, we touched on some of the highlights, but like you said, there's some implementations that haven't gone great that we've seen either on, like you said, on Twitter or online, or learnings that I've even done myself where I'm like, that was not thought about. We did not think about that great. For me, it was always the conversational bots, the support desk AIs. I have found that to be the hardest nut to crack when it comes to a product team, making it like truly like useful to a person. Because when people reach out to support, they're already frustrated about something. So AI, is that really going to help you get a refund? Or I find that there's sometimes the problem statement of the conversational AI piece has been, I think, probably my biggest learning out of all of the implementations that we could do that I've like worked on specifically. And that's been my biggest area for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know we're coming up to time here, so I wanted to ask, is there something that you want everybody tuning in to go check out, either something you're working on or the best thing you've seen recently?
Yeah, sure. So right now I own a boutique, a fractional product leadership company. So we provide not only frameworks, we have a speed loop framework that we help get teams in. But our main goal and our main mission in life is to get teams to become more efficient. And the way we do that is we bring in a product leader, and that product leader works inside the development team, not outside as a consultant that just creates another PowerPoint. So if anyone's listening that's interested in having a fractional product leader, you can visit scaleafire.com to book a meeting.
Definitely do it. Jason's the best. So check out scaleafire.com. Jason, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been super fun.
It is. It's been a blast, Nick. Love it. Appreciate it.